Donald Trump faced a black girl asking about building an empire. He paused, smirked, then dropped a statement that silenced the entire room. New York, a dazzling evening under the city lights, where the brightest minds in business gathered for a major investment conference. On stage, Donald Trump, the legendary businessman and U.S. president, was sharing his strategy for building a billion-dollar empire. In the luxurious hall, hundreds of investors, CEOs, and media professionals listened attentively. This was not just a speech, but a masterclass from the man who had once dominated both the real estate market and American politics. Amidst the solemn atmosphere, a voice rang out from the back of the hall. A young black woman stood up. She wasn't dressed in an expensive suit or carrying a designer handbag. She wore a simple button-up shirt, clutching a notebook tightly against her chest. Her voice was clear, steady, and filled with determination. "Mr. Trump, I have no money, no connections, but I want to build a great business. Will you give me a chance?" The hall fell silent. Some people chuckled, others exchanged puzzled glances. A young, unknown woman, without credentials, without experience, was boldly asking Donald Trump for an opportunity, right here, right now. All eyes turned to Trump. He looked at the woman, raising an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. The room held its breath, waiting for his response. Trump slowly studied the young woman in front of him. The entire hall remained silent, everyone curious to see how he would react. Some were already poised to laugh at her audacity. But Trump didn't laugh. He tilted his head slightly, his sharp gaze assessing her as if she were an investment opportunity. Finally he spoke, his voice calm yet authoritative. "You say you want to build a great business? But ideas don't make money. Can you prove that you have what it takes?" Maya swallowed hard, but her eyes remained unwavering. She knew this was the moment, the defining moment, to prove herself. "I can," she answered, her voice firm. "Give me 30 days. I'll show you." A few people in the audience chuckled, some shook their heads. To them, this was nothing more than a joke. An unknown entrepreneur, with no assets and no connections, daring to make such a claim in front of Donald Trump? But Trump still didn't laugh. He remained silent for a moment, then suddenly a faint, unreadable smile crossed his lips. The kind of smile that those who had followed him knew meant he was genuinely intrigued. "All right," he said, crossing his arms. "You have 30 days. If you can turn an idea into something real, I'll take a look." The room erupted. Some engaged in excited discussions, others remained skeptical. But Maya didn't care. She focused on one thing: she had an opportunity. And she couldn't afford to waste it. Maya stepped out of the conference hall, her heart pounding. She had 30 days. But where to begin? She had 30 days. But where to begin? She had no money, no connections, no experience. But she had one thing: a promise to Donald Trump. This wasn't just a challenge. This was proof. Not just to Trump. Not just to those who had laughed at her. But to herself. She would make it happen. Or fail spectacularly. Day 1. Maya threw herself into work as if time were her greatest enemy. She woke up at 5 a.m., sitting at her desk, staring at a blank screen. How to start? She opened her to-do list. Secure funding. Build a plan. Find customers. Learn how to sell. Everything needed to be done immediately, but she didn't have enough time. She decided to focus on securing funding first. At any cost, she needed some money to get started. She applied for a job at a nearby coffee shop, taking on an 8-hour shift each day. She threw herself into work with relentless determination, fueled by coffee, adrenaline, and an unshakable belief that she would make it. But after just 5 days, her body began to rebel. Her eyes burned red. Her throat was parched from dehydration. Every time she stood up, the world spun as if she were on the verge of collapse. Her mind screamed at her to stop, but Maya clenched her fists, her gaze resolute. She would not stop. Then, on the night of the 10th day, Maya sat in front of her laptop, her eyes locked onto the screen. She was composing an email to a potential client, possibly her first contract. Her fingers typed each word, but her mind grew foggy. The letters on the screen started to dance. She blinked. The room began to swirl, heat radiating from her flushed skin. She slumped over her desk, her breathing heavy, her body burning with fever. For the next 3 days, Maya couldn't get out of bed. Her parents cared for her day and night, their worry evident as they urged her to stop. She understood their concern, but she didn't want to stop. She needed to prove that she could do this. Yet, deep down, she hated herself for being so weak, so incapable. Those thoughts, fleeting yet piercing, made her body ache, her mind clouded with exhaustion. Many times she wanted to quit. She thought, I'm a failure. 3 days passed, and Maya cried in silence. 3 days of nothing. 3 days wasted. Her confidence plummeted. She thought of the people who had laughed at her, the friends who told her she wasn't good enough, strong enough, that she should just quit. Maybe they were right. That night, Maya sat alone at her desk, feeling empty and hopeless. She stared at her computer screen with vacant eyes. The emails she had sent remained unanswered. She had pushed herself to the limit, but no one cared. No one believed in her. Drowning in self-pity and disappointment, Maya sobbed uncontrollably, her cries muffled in the empty room. No one heard her. She curled into herself, her head resting on her arms. She wanted to give up. Negative thoughts flooded her mind, her chest tightening as despair consumed her. Her face was twisted in anguish, her eyes swollen and red. She whispered to herself, "Why am I doing this? Am I destroying myself?" She picked up her phone and opened her messaging app. Her fingers trembled as she began typing to a friend, "You were right. I was wrong. I quit." But just before she hit send, a voice echoed in her mind. Trump's voice. "Prove that you're worthy." The words cut through the darkness like a beacon of light. Maya took a sharp breath. She couldn't let this dream end here. She had to make it. She decided to change her strategy. Instead of spending hours sending countless emails, she invested in online advertising to attract clients. She wanted to work smarter, not harder. But then she realized something terrible. Advertising required money she didn't have. Potential clients saw her ads, but they didn't trust her. She lacked a brand, lacked recognition. Nothing was working. Once again she felt trapped. Maya sat at her desk, clutching her head, breathing heavily. Everything she thought would save her time had failed. She wanted to scream. But instead, she just cried in silence through the night. That morning, Maya opened her eyes and immediately felt an unbearable weight pressing down on her body. She slowly sat up, her eyes stinging from lack of sleep, her head spinning as if she had just been knocked down after a long, brutal battle. In reality, she had been fighting, and she was losing. She dragged herself into the bathroom, flicked on the light, and stared at the mirror. The reflection made her shudder. She saw a stranger looking back at her, dark circles, sunken deep like hollow pits. Ashen, lifeless skin. Hair disheveled, brittle, void of energy. She gripped the edge of the sink, clutching it as if even the slightest breeze could knock her over. What the hell have I done to myself? Suddenly, everything felt meaningless. She had worked endlessly, pushed herself to the edge. For what? All she had now was a broken body and an exhausted mind. Again, the thoughts crept into her head. Did I take the wrong path from the start? Am I fooling myself into thinking I can do this? Should I just give up? Should I accept that I'm not good enough? Her mouth tasted bitter, her thoughts tangled in chaos. She wanted to resist the negativity, force herself to be positive, but she couldn't. A chilling fear wrapped around her. She couldn't bear this feeling any longer. She walked over to her desk, opened her laptop, and moved her cursor to the email icon. She was about to send a message to Donald Trump. An apology. A surrender. But just as she was about to type, she remembered the way Trump had looked her in the eye and said, "Prove that you're worthy." She stared at the screen, her trembling fingers frozen in place. She closed her eyes. Took a deep breath. She couldn't do this. She couldn't quit. Not now. Maya wiped her tears, inhaled deeply. She knew she was stepping into the next chapter of her battle. She lifted her gaze to the clock on the wall. 4:58 a.m. Her eyelids felt like lead, every muscle in her body strained as if shackled by chains. Beside her sat a cold cup of coffee, dark stains seeping into the pages of notes filled with numbers. There was no time to think. There was no time to feel exhausted. Now, there was only action. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, just long enough to feel the frantic beating of her heart, as if her body was screaming, "You're going to collapse." But she didn't care. She opened her laptop, her shaky fingers moving the mouse to her list of potential clients. Each name was a door, an opportunity to hold on to. She just needed one yes. Just one. The keyboard clattered under her fingertips, a rhythmic soundtrack to the chaos in her mind. Write, edit, repeat, repeat, repeat. By the time the first rays of sunlight crept through her curtains, Maya snapped her laptop shut. She had to go to work. No time for breakfast. No time to think. Dragging herself down the street, every step felt like lead. But the moment she stepped through the cafe doors, her face changed instantly. A fake smile. A cheerful voice. "Good morning. What would you like today?" No one knew that her mind was consumed with frantic thoughts of how to survive another day. That evening, as Maya returned home, something felt wrong. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the door, her legs wobbly as if she had lost all sense of balance. She staggered, leaning against the wall. "I need rest." But the thought of spending even a few hours asleep sent her into panic. She couldn't. She had 5 potential clients to contact. An unfinished financial report. A half-written presentation. She couldn't waste a single second. She sat at her desk, forcing herself to open her laptop, but the numbers on the screen blurred before her eyes. A searing headache throbbed in her skull. Nausea churned in her stomach. She reached for a glass of water, but her fingers were too weak to hold it. The glass slipped from her grasp, shattering on the floor. She collapsed. The cold floor cradled her body, yet she felt like she was burning from the inside out. She could hear her own breath, shallow, weak, labored. A surge of fear swept over her. Not the fear of passing out, but the fear that she might not be able to go on. Maya woke up to an unbearable ache that settled deep into her bones. It felt as if someone had been punching her skull all night. Everything hurt. Everything was drained. But she sprang up immediately. She had no time to be sick. Her stomach was empty. She couldn't even remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. She gulped down a sip of water and looked in the mirror. The face staring back at her was gaunt, hollow, with dark circles under her eyes like deep craters. She took a slow, deep breath. 4 days left. I can't stop now. Her tiny apartment looked like a war zone. Scattered papers. Empty coffee cups. Her laptop, always open, its screen flickering from overuse. Maya sat amid the chaos, her vision hazy from exhaustion. But she didn't stop. The financial reports on her screen inched toward completion. Each slide in her presentation was refined to perfection, leaving no room for mistakes. Now, everything was ready. She checked the clock. 4 a.m. Stepping away from her desk, she walked to the window. New York still glittered with lights. She leaned her forehead against the glass and closed her eyes. Breathed deeply. For the first time in 3 weeks, she felt a moment of peace. No panic. No anxiety. Just determination. Tomorrow, it would all end. Tomorrow, she would face Donald Trump. Maya pulled open her closet and took out the crispest white shirt she owned. She tied her hair back neatly, looking at herself in the mirror once more. She still looked like someone who had been through hell. But her eyes burned with fire. She had pushed herself to the absolute limit. Now she had only one mission left: make Donald Trump believe in her. Maya stepped out of her apartment, each step firmer than ever. As she stood before Trump Tower, staring up at the towering skyscraper, she felt her heartbeat quicken. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was determination. Everything would end today. Or this would be the day she changed her life forever. Maya walked into Trump Tower, the skyscraper looming over New York. Everything around her exuded grandeur and prestige, making her feel impossibly small. Businessmen strode past her, polished, confident, clad in expensive suits. They looked like they belonged here. And her? Just a black girl starting from nothing, stepping into this place with the hope that she could convince Donald Trump to believe in her. Her grip tightened around the folder in her hands, as if it were the only ticket keeping her alive in this room. She took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and kept walking. The elevator carried her to the top floor, where a massive conference room with glass ceilings overlooked the entire city of New York. The air here reeked of power, a presence that could either overwhelm or awaken ambition. At the head of the room, Donald Trump sat. Arms crossed, his sharp gaze pierced through her as if he could see everything she had endured in the past 30 days. Beside him was a long row of executives, investors, and senior advisors, people who could change the fate of anyone with just a nod. They looked at her with curiosity. Some intrigued, some skeptical, some smirking. Maya felt the crushing weight of the room pressing on her shoulders. But she refused to let it consume her. She stepped into the center of the room, straightened her spine, and met Trump's gaze head-on. No one spoke in the first few seconds. Only tense silence, almost as if they were testing to see if she had the composure to withstand the pressure of this. Then, Trump raised an eyebrow. "What do you have for me?" His question was short, direct, emotionless. No words of encouragement. No patience. She had no time to stammer. No right to hesitate. She took a deep breath and slowly placed the folder onto the table in front of him. "I completed your challenge." She opened the folder, her voice steady. "This is everything I've done in the past 30 days. A real business, with real customers, generating real revenue." She slid the folder toward him, her gaze unwavering. "I didn't come here with an idea. I came here with results." The room fell silent for a moment. Some raised their eyebrows. Some began paying closer attention. Trump glanced at the folder, flipping through the pages slowly. His hand rested in the center of the document, but his eyes never left her. Then, his voice, low and razor-sharp, cut through the air. "How much did you make?" Maya swallowed hard. She had expected this question. She took a deep breath, steadying her voice. $5,000 in the first month." Trump arched an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. He turned another page, scanning through her work with an unnerving slowness. Then he looked up, locking eyes with her, and uttered a sentence that made the entire room hold its breath. "I used to make $5,000 in 5 minutes." A few people in the room chuckled. A man sitting nearby shook his head, muttering in a mocking tone, "Just $5,000? You think that number is supposed to impress us?" Maya turned to face him instantly, fire igniting in her eyes. She hadn't come here to be dismissed. She looked straight at the man and said, enunciating every word with precision, "Then let me ask you this. Could you start with zero, no money, no connections, no resources, and make that amount in 30 days? The man didn't respond. Trump slowly leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the polished walnut table. "I like your confidence." Then, suddenly, Trump snapped the folder shut with a sharp clack that echoed across the room. Every gaze in the room locked onto him. No one knew what he was thinking. Then, he clasped his hands together, his voice calm but laced with a subtle challenge. "Your report is solid. Your numbers are reasonable. But I have one last question." Maya clenched her fists, trying to steady her. Pounding heart. Trump stared at her, his voice slow, deliberate, carrying an immense weight. "What did you sacrifice to achieve this result?" She hadn't expected that question. She thought he would ask about revenue, profit, strategy. But no. He wanted to know the price she had paid. The room fell completely silent. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. Maya felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest. She remembered everything. The sleepless nights, the dizziness, the times she collapsed from exhaustion. The fever that knocked her down for 3 days, rendering her powerless. The silent cries in the dark, questioning whether she was destroying herself. The moments she nearly quit, but Trump's voice echoed in her mind, "Prove that you're worthy." She took a deep breath, aware that the entire room was waiting for her answer. Then, she looked Trump straight in the eye and spoke, her voice low but solid as forged steel. "I sacrificed my sleep, my health, my emotions, and at times, even my sanity. But there's one thing I never lost: my will. I didn't just do this for you. I did this because I made a promise to myself that I would not give up. A tense moment of silence. The executives exchanged glances. Even the man who had mocked her earlier looked slightly taken aback. And Trump? He gave a slight nod. Trump stood up. He walked slowly toward Maya. Each step echoed powerfully in the quiet room. When he stopped in front of her, everyone held their breath. Then he looked her straight in the eye, the corner of his mouth curling into that signature Trump smirk. I like people who don't cry, don't complain, don't make excuses. I like people who just do. He extended his hand. Welcome to the real world. Maya's eyes widened. She could hardly believe what she had just heard. The room erupted into applause. Donald Trump had accepted her. He believed in her. She had done it. She had proven she was worthy. Maya had accomplished what few dared to even dream. She had walked into a room full of the most powerful people, faced Donald Trump, and proved she belonged. Her journey had not just been a challenge. It had been a battle with herself. A battle where willpower and perseverance were pushed to their absolute limits. But is this truly the end? Or merely the beginning of an even more grueling journey? When one door opens, countless new paths appear. Success is not built in a single moment, but in the accumulation of countless small decisions. The sleepless nights, the moments of near collapse where one still finds the strength to rise. In a world where only those who refuse to accept failure survive, is proving yourself once ever enough? Or will Maya have to keep fighting to maintain the position she has just won? One challenge has ended, but the pressures ahead may be even harsher. If she has pushed herself to the limit to earn this opportunity, does she have the strength to protect it? Life is filled with the unexpected, shocks that can change everything in an instant. Are you ready to face the moments that could define your future? What if, tomorrow, one small decision alters your path entirely? Maya's story is not just about success. It's about willpower, about fear, and about how we choose to overcome it. It is not just her story. It is the story of anyone who has ever stood on the edge of giving up, caught between surrender and perseverance. Her grueling journey stands as proof of one undeniable truth: fear can break us. But that very fear can also become our greatest force to push forward. Thank you for following this story. May Maya's journey inspire you to find your courage, your determination, and your belief in yourself. Life is an endless series of challenges, but as long as you refuse to give up, every step forward has meaning. This content has been compiled and rewritten with AI assistance and does not represent any individual or organization. Any resemblance to real events or persons is purely coincidental.